There's a moment every man carries. The moment the silence between you got heavier than the words. The moment her eyes stopped searching for you, not because you hurt her, not because you failed her, but because you stopped surprising her. You stopped growing. You stopped leading. You stopped being the man who was becoming more. And in that stillness, not the stillness of strength, but the stillness of stagnation, she left you long before she walked away, because women don't leave men they outgrow. They leave men who outgrow themselves. This isn't a video about her. It's a mirror for you, for the man left standing in the wreckage, wondering what went wrong, not because you were too soft, not because you were too kind, but because somewhere along the way you stopped becoming. You made her your purpose and lost your edge, your fire, your direction. This matters because healing isn't about winning her back. It's about remembering who you were before you handed her the peen and let her write your worth. Comment, I don't chase what walked away. Number 1, safety is not desire. She didn't leave because you were safe. She left because she stopped feeling alive next to you. You thought safety was the goal, didn't you? You thought that if you could make her feel secure, if you could show her loyalty, if you could be dependable, gentle and good, that this would be enough, that this was love, that being the man who never hurt her would also be the man who kept her. But here you are, alone, staring at your phone, replaying every moment where you thought you were doing the right thing, and asking yourself the question every good man asks after she leaves. Why wasn't I enough? And I'll tell you, not to hurt you, but to wake you, because the truth is quieter than anger and sharper than blame. She didn't leave because you were nice. She didn't leave because you were safe. She left because you became predictable. And predictable isn't love. Predictable isn't desire. Predictable is death, to polarity, to mystery, to the electric pulse between man and woman. You became her comfort zone, her soft place to land, but not her spark, not her edge, not her story, because somewhere along the way, you stopped being a world she could get lost in and became a map she had already memorized. Every joke, every move, every rhythm of your life, already written, already finished. She could see the ending. And women don't stay in stories they've already read. Let me be clear. Safety is beautiful, loyalty is sacred, kindness is rare, but without mystery, without depth, without movement, safety turns into silence, kindness turns into compliance, loyalty turns into passivity, and the man who once held her breath captive becomes the man who fades quietly into the background of her life. This is not an insult to you. This is not a punishment. This is nature. This is polarity. Feminine energy expands into feeling. Masculine energy expands into freedom. And when your life became small, when your days blurred together, when your habits dulled your edge, when you stopped being a man in motion, she stopped feeling alive next to you. You didn't lose her because you weren't enough. You lost her because you stopped being new. Not to the world, but to yourself. Because here is the Stoic truth. A grounded man is safe, but a growing man is unforgettable. A calm man is peace, but an evolving man is power. Masculinity is not about chaos. It's not about games. It's about mystery born from depth, from purpose, from solitude, from not needing her to complete you because you are already complete, but endlessly expanding, endlessly curious, endlessly alive. The man who stays in motion. Mentally, spiritually, physically, the man who is always carving himself into someone he hasn't met yet. That man never becomes predictable. That man never becomes dull. That man never begs for attention because he is too busy becoming. So, let this be the moment you stop asking why she left and start asking, where have I stopped moving? Where have I stopped becoming? What part of me has become so safe it's put my soul to sleep? Not for her, not to win her back, not to prove her wrong, but because the world needs less men frozen in safety and more men dangerous in their peace, dangerous in their growth, dangerous in their self-possession. This isn't rejection. This is an invitation to evolve, to step back into your wildness, to step back into the unknown, not recklessly, not destructively, but with quiet certainty, with a slow burning fire, with the kind of presence that doesn't chase because it leads. Remember this, a man who lives in motion never has to ask why she left, because she will feel it, she will see it, and whether she returns or not, you will never return to who you used to be. Number 2, validation is your weakest drug. You didn't love her. You loved how she made you feel about yourself. Be honest, brutally honest. What hurt more when she left? Losing her, or losing the way you felt when she looked at you like you were enough? That ache in your chest, that hollow space where her voice used to echo in your head, isn't just about her absence. It's about the collapse of the man you built inside her eyes. Because you weren't just in love with her. You were in love with the version of you she reflected back to you. And now that mirror is gone, that approval, that validation, that steady drip of you matter, it's gone. And without it, you feel like nothing, like no one. This is the quiet addiction most men never see coming. Not to her body, not to her company, but to her approval, to her smiles, her compliments, her affection, to the invisible permission she gave you to feel like a man. And when that permission is revoked, you spiral, you text things you never thought you'd text, you say things that embarrass you, you bargain, you beg, not because she's your oxygen, but because validation was, and now you're suffocating. Understand this. This is not love. This is not devotion. This is dependency, addiction in its cleanest form. Her attention became your drug. And like all drugs, it felt incredible at first. It soothed you, it lit you up, it made the world brighter until it didn't, until the highs got shorter, the lows got longer, and suddenly you weren't choosing love, you were chasing relief. A man who needs validation will trade away everything just to get his next hit, his dignity, his boundaries, his self-respect, and you did, didn't you? You softened your edges. You told her everything she wanted to hear. You withheld your truth just to avoid conflict. You molded yourself into something smaller, something safer, something easier to love. But it didn't work. It never does. Because a man who loses himself to be loved isn't loved. He's tolerated, pitied, avoided. Because deep down, she could feel it. The desperation beneath your kindness, the emptiness beneath your devotion, the need beneath your affection. And need is repellent, not because you aren't worthy, but because true masculinity doesn't need validation. It creates it. It radiates from a man who respects himself so deeply, so completely, that he doesn't bend for approval. He doesn't starve for attention. He feeds on purpose, on solitude, on growth. This is what a Stoic man understands, that attention is currency, but peace is wealth, that love is a gift, but self-respect is non-negotiable. And any man who gives away his center of gravity for another person's approval will always feel like he's falling, always grasping, always reaching for hands that were never built to catch him. So now is the moment, right here, right now, the moment where you look at the wreckage, at the texts you wish you could unsend, at the nights you stayed awake waiting for a reply, and you stop. You stop chasing validation like a starving man chases crumbs. You stop begging for eyes to look at you like you matter, and you start building a man who doesn't wait for anyone to tell him who he is. You don't need her words to know your worth. You don't need her affection to feel whole. You don't need her attention to feel alive, because the only approval that cannot be taken from you is the approval you give yourself. Through action, through discipline, through becoming a man of substance, a man of motion, a man who lives by his own code, not because anyone's watching, but because that's who he chooses to be. That's freedom, that's power, that's peace. You weren't in love. You were addicted to the feeling of being seen, but now you see yourself, and that is a vision no one can take from you. Number 3, predictability kills polarity. She didn't leave because you changed. She left because you stopped changing. There's a moment, quiet but unmistakable, when you realize she's already written your next move, when your words don't light her up anymore, when your presence doesn't shift the energy in the room, when you look into her eyes and they're not searching for you anymore. And maybe it didn't happen all at once. Maybe it happened over months or years. But deep down, you stopped being a mystery. You became a loop, and not a wild, captivating one that pulls her in deeper, but a flat, tired rhythm she could hum in her sleep. Every morning, she knew how you'd show up. Every text, already written in her mind before you hit send. Every date night, a copy of the one before. Every reaction, every opinion, every version of you. Predictable. Not because you didn't care, but because you thought consistency would make her feel safe, and it did just for a while, but safety without depth isn't love. It's comfort, and comfort kills polarity. You stopped living your life for you and started living it through her. You traded your edge for ease, your evolution for routine, your presence for performance, and she felt it, not in words, not in arguments, but in the absence of tension, the kind that makes a woman lean in, that magnetic space between masculine direction and feminine flow. It was gone, because you weren't leading anymore. You were just reacting, repeating, drifting, and here's what you may not have realized. Masculine energy moves. It penetrates, it explores, it creates direction, tension, gravity, not through chaos, but through momentum. And when a man loses his momentum, he loses polarity, he loses presence, he loses her. You didn't stop being a man, you just stopped becoming one. And when you did, you gave her nothing new to feel. And feminine energy, it craves sensation, it follows direction, it dances with the unknown. You gave her predictability, as when she needed polarity. You gave her comfort when she needed your edge. And this isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more of yourself. You stopped challenging your own limits. You stopped doing what scared you. You stopped growing, stretching, deepening. Not because you were lazy, but because you thought being enough meant arriving, when in truth being a man means never staying still. So here's the illusion. You thought being solid would hold her, but you became stagnant. And here's the truth. Masculinity isn't just structure. It's momentum, it's motion, it's mystery through growth. The man she fell for wasn't finished. He was in motion. He was pursuing something deeper than her. He was leading his own life, not following hers. And when that stopped, so did the polarity. This isn't to shame you. This is to free you, because the pain you feel right now, the ache, the loss, the confusion, it isn't punishment. It's a signal that you stop moving. And now the only way out is forward, not toward her, not toward the past, but into the version of yourself she was once magnetized by, the version who didn't need her to feel alive, the version who woke up hungry for depth, for purpose, for challenge, a man. She couldn't read, not because he was playing games, but because he was writing a story even he hadn't finished yet. That's what makes a man magnetic. That's what brings polarity back into the room. Not noise, not ego, not tricks, but depth, stillness, vision, movement. So let this be the moment you stop chasing what she saw in you and start becoming what you stopped seeing in yourself. Because predictability didn't just kill the relationship. It killed the man who was meant to be more. But he's still there, buried under habits, under comfort, under fear of being misunderstood. Dig him out, let him lead again. And when you do, you won't need her to feel desire again, because you'll become desire. Number 4, neediness is emotional debt. You didn't lose her because you cared too much. You lost her because you abandoned yourself. Tell me the truth. How many times did you stare at your phone, typing, deleting, rewriting the same message? Please, just talk to me. Please, I need to explain. Please, just tell me what I did wrong. Not because you didn't know, but because you had nothing left inside to stand on. That ache in your chest, that storm of panic and overthinking. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was emptiness. It was a man standing where a mountain used to be. And in that emptiness, neediness was born. Not because you're weak, not because you're broken, but because somewhere along the way, you stopped holding your own ground. You stopped being your own refuge. And instead, you made her your oxygen, your anchor, your mirror. Every smile from her, a deposit into your worth. Every touch from her, proof that you mattered. Every reply, a hit of relief from the panic rising in your chest. And when she pulled away, when the silence grew longer, when her words grew colder, you didn't chase love, you chased safety. You chased relief from the unbearable feeling of being left alone with you. And here's the brutal truth, the one no one tells you when you're drowning in heartbreak. Neediness isn't love. It's emotional debt. It says, I've given up on me, now you owe me peace. And no woman, no human wants to carry that kind of debt, because it doesn't feel like love. It feels like pressure. It feels like weight. It feels like being responsible for a man who won't stand on his own feet. And the more you beg, the more you explain, the more you chase, the more you confirm to her and to yourself that you have nothing left inside. But here's what you forgot, and what you need to remember now. A man's worth was never supposed to come from another person, not from her words, not from her approval, not from her attention. It comes from presence. It comes from being so rooted in who you are, so whole, so grounded, that no silence can unmake you, no rejection can unman you, no absence can unearth you. That's the Stoic truth you forgot. Neediness happens when you stop living for your own mission, when you trade self-respect for approval, when you look to someone else to tell you you're enough, instead of building a life so full, so rich, so purposeful, that anyone who walks away simply returns to their own world, not tears yours apart. This is why the greatest heartbreak isn't losing her. It's realizing you lost yourself. That somewhere, long before the arguments, long before the late-night texts, long before the silence. You abandoned your edge, you abandoned your discipline, you abandoned the man you were becoming, not for love, but for comfort, for relief, for approval. But approval is borrowed time, and the debt always comes due. So here you are, empty, hollow, alone. And this, right now, is the moment you rebuild. Not to win her back, not to prove anything, not to fill the void with someone new, but to stand, to return to the mountain you were supposed to be, solid, unmoving, quietly powerful. A man who does not beg, a man who does not chase, a man who does not send words into the void, hoping to be saved because he has already saved himself. Neediness is emotional bankruptcy. Love is abundance shared. And right now, you start building abundance again. In solitude, in purpose, in quiet, disciplined action, not for them, but for you, so that next time, when someone walks away, you don't fall apart. You stand even taller because you are whole without them, without anyone, without needing permission to be complete. Comment below, I owe no one my peace. Number 5, authenticity is dangerous. She didn't leave because you weren't nice enough. She left because you weren't real enough. Tell me, how many times did you swallow your truth? How many times did you nod when you didn't agree? How many times did you say, it's fine, when it wasn't? Not because you were weak, but because you thought that's what love required. Peace at any price, harmony without tension, agreement without authenticity. You thought that keeping her meant keeping quiet. Keeping her meant keeping soft. Keeping her meant keeping small. But here's the truth that stings the hardest. A man who agrees with everything is a man with no shape. A man who never says no is a man who can't be trusted. Not by her, not by himself. Because if you won't protect your own boundaries, how can you ever protect hers if you won't defend your own truth? How can you ever lead her anywhere worth going? You thought saying yes to everything would make her feel loved, but all it did was make her feel alone. Because a woman doesn't want a mirror. She wants a mountain, something to push against, something to test her own strength, something to lean on when the world falls apart. But you weren't a mountain, you were a reflection, a shadow of what she wanted to see, a man shaped by fear, not by principle. Fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of conflict, and what you feared. You created, you feared losing her, and you lost her because love without truth is not love. It's performance, it's theater. It's temporary. Authenticity is dangerous because authenticity has edges, it has weight, it creates friction, not conflict for the sake of ego, but tension for the sake of reality. Tension is not the enemy of love. Tension is proof that two people still exist as individuals, two souls with their own gravity and the space between them. That push and pull. That's where desire lives, not in sameness, not in silence, but in difference. She didn't leave because you disagreed too little. She left because you disappeared. Right in front of her, every small lie, every swallowed thought, every quiet surrender of who you really were. It didn't keep her close. It pushed her away. Not because she wanted control, but because she wanted truth. She wanted a man she could trust to tell her no, a man who could lead with clarity, a man who could love without losing himself. That's the man who stays, not because he clings, not because he pleases, but because he stands. And here's the Stoic reality. Peace without truth is not peace, it's avoidance. Love without disagreement is not love, it's performance. And a man without authenticity is not a man. He's a ghost in his own life. So let this be the moment you stop apologizing for your edge. Let this be the moment you stop folding to be liked. Let this be the moment you stop disappearing. A woman doesn't need you to agree with her. She needs to feel you, the real you, the man who knows what he thinks, the man who stands on what he believes, the man who can love deeply and still say no, because no is love too. No is protection, no is leadership, no is clarity, and clarity is love in its sharpest form. Authenticity is dangerous, but it's also magnetic, because when you become a man with shape, with weight, with presence, you don't need to hold anyone down to keep them close. They stay because they choose to stay. They stay because they feel something real, and that's all you ever needed to be. Not perfect, not agreeable, not easy, but real, solid, unmoving in your truth, unshakable in your presence, a mountain in a world of mirrors. Number 6, your peace is power. She didn't leave because you were calm, she left because your calm was empty. Tell me, what does your silence sound like? Be honest. When the noise stops, when the texts stop, when the room goes quiet, what do you hear? Peace or panic? Because there's a silence that heals, and there's a silence that hurts. One is strength, the other is emptiness, and only you know which one lives inside you. She didn't leave because you were calm. She left because your calm wasn't earned. It was hollow. It was performance. It was the quiet of a man who had nothing left to say. Not because he was wise, but because he was afraid. Afraid to feel, afraid to confront himself, afraid to speak a truth that might shake the ground he was clinging to. So you stayed quiet, not with strength, but with fear, not with depth, but with numbness. That's not peace, that's avoidance. There's a world of difference between the two. Peace is the calm of a man who knows who he is. Avoidance is the quiet of a man who has forgotten. You see, real peace comes from inner work, not distraction, not running, not chasing the next hit of attention to numb the ache in your chest. It comes from sitting in the fire of solitude and letting it burn away everything that isn't you. It comes from facing the thoughts that haunt you and making peace with them. Not because they disappear, but because they no longer control you. Real peace is earned by fighting your own battles in the dark, by standing alone long enough to remember your own weight, by building a life so grounded, so rich with purpose, so aligned with your truth, that no one's absence can shake it. And here's what she felt. Even if you never said it, she felt the ache in your silence, the waiting, the hoping, the emptiness. She felt the man who wasn't building anything without her. She felt the stillness of stagnation, not of strength. Because calm isn't about being quiet. Calm is about being full of direction, full of mission, full of grounded, unapologetic energy. Real men aren't loud because they don't have to be, not because they're afraid to speak, but because their life speaks for them. Their presence speaks for them, their peace speaks for them, and that peace is felt by everyone in the room, not because they are performing calmness, but because they are calmness. It radiates from a man who doesn't chase, who doesn't beg, who doesn't fill his days with noise just to avoid himself. It radiates from a man who owns his time, owns his thoughts, owns his solitude. That's what masculine energy is. Not aggression, not control, not noise, but depth, stillness, power restrained by wisdom. So if you want peace, if you want real calm, you cannot borrow it from someone else. You cannot steal it from a relationship. You cannot fake it with silence. You build it brick by brick, in discipline, in solitude, in purpose. You become the man who doesn't need anyone to complete him, because he already filled the space inside himself with truth. And in that truth, he is untouchable. This is what she didn't feel anymore. Not calmness, not safety, but emptiness. She didn't leave because you were calm. She left because you stopped becoming. You stopped building the man you were meant to be. And now, this is your invitation to return, not to her, not to what was, but to the man who builds his peace from within. The man who wakes with purpose, who sits in solitude like it's sacred, who carries stillness like a sword, not to harm, but to protect his own soul. Because that is real power. Peace is not the absence of noise. It is the presence of self, and no one can take that from you unless you let them. Comment below. My peace is built, not borrowed. Number 7. This was never about her. You thought she broke you, but all she did was show you where you'd already disappeared. There's a moment, and you'll know it when it comes, when you stop crying about her, when you stop obsessing over what she said, when you stop replaying that night she walked away, when you stop trying to decode the silence and instead you start asking something far more honest. When did I stop being me? Because this pain you're feeling, it runs deeper than the breakup. It's not just about a lost relationship, it's about a lost identity, a version of you that once stood tall, that once believed in himself, that once had direction and fire and pride. She didn't take that from you. You gave it away quietly, slowly, one small compromise at a time. You gave it up every time you avoided your truth to keep her close, every time you softened your voice to sound more agreeable, every time you stopped chasing your mission just to chase her attention. So now, in the stillness of heartbreak, you're not just mourning her, you're mourning you, the man you were supposed to become. And that's the hardest pill to swallow, that this was never really about her. Not the pain, not the sleepless nights, not the anger, the begging, the confusion. She was the mirror, not the wound, the symptom, not the cause. What broke inside of you was already cracked long before she left, long before she lost interest, long before she pulled away. She just reflected it with brutal, silent honesty. And yes, it hurts. God, it hurts. But that pain, that raw, brutal ache in your chest, that's not destruction, that's rebirth. That's your soul shaking you awake, screaming, do not go back to sleep. You thought this was heartbreak, but this is resurrection. This is the death of the man who lived for approval, who depended on validation, who mistook attention for love. This is the end of the man who forgot how to lead himself, who built his worth in someone else's hands, who confused comfort with purpose, and now begins the rebuilding. But not of what was, not of the version of you that loved her from a place of lack. You rebuild with silence that doesn't ache, with solitude that doesn't beg, with power that no longer needs to be seen. Because the man you're becoming, he doesn't chase, he doesn't collapse, he doesn't look to others to confirm who he is. He leads, he lives in alignment, he speaks truth, not to win, but to honor himself. He chooses peace, not to avoid conflict, but because he no longer needs the noise. And maybe one day someone will stand beside him, but not above him, not in place of him, not as the source of his identity, because now he remembers this was never About her, she just showed you what you forgot. She just pointed to the place inside you that needed to be rebuilt, not patched. Rebuilt with stone, with presence, with power. So sit with that pain a little longer, not to suffer, but to learn. And then, it's not to prove anything, not to get her back, not to post some half-baked "I'm thriving now" story, but to become the man you were always meant to be, the one who doesn't need anyone to feel whole, the one who stands like a mountain even in the storm, because now you know this wasn't heartbreak, this was a return to you. The man who started this video was hurting, searching, looking backward, but the man who's still here now, he's not searching anymore. He's remembering who he was before the approval, before the silence, before the need to be chosen. You've seen now that her leaving wasn't the collapse. It was the reveal, the quiet unveiling of a man who had paused his growth for the comfort of being understood. But you don't need to be understood anymore. You need to be undeniable, calm, clear, unmoved by the storms around you. Because the fire within you is steady again. You no longer chase, you no longer explain, you no longer try to make someone feel something that should have been felt naturally. Now you move in silence, not to hide, but because your peace is loud enough without noise. You don't need closure, you are the closure. You are the calm after the storm, because you are no longer in the storm. So take one last breath and leave behind the man who thought he needed her to feel whole. You don't need her to return. You don't need her to understand. You don't need her to see your worth. Because you see it now, and that's enough. Comment, "I protect my peace, even from the past." Subscribe if you're walking forward, not to prove a point, but because your direction no longer depends on who stays.